In this video, we're going to showcase 10 greenhouses from the MakerPipe community. These are all made with off-the-shelf electrical conduit and MakerPipe fittings, and you don't have to do any welding whenever you use these materials. You just use handheld tools to be able to build all kinds of custom projects. And one of the ones that we've seen over the years a lot is a greenhouse. And we're just going to break down some different techniques and highlight some different things in case you need some ideas for a greenhouse or some frost protection in your garden. This first one comes from CL, and this is really awesome. This is meant to be kind of a lean-to greenhouse that they put together, and this one is made entirely out of half-inch EMT conduit, and then they use some of the MakerPipe 3/4-inch connectors and half-inch connector shims to be able to use that half-inch to build the structure of this frame. And they shared a bunch of photos. There's 41 pictures here in total that you can scroll through and kind of see the whole process. And on Thursday this week, we're going to go through and kind of walk through these photos and break it down in more detail. But for now, we'll just kind of scroll through pretty quickly so you can get an overall idea of how this was put together. And it's pretty much just your typical, rectangular shape. And they used, the typical connectors that we see in this kind of thing, which is the 90-degree connector in the corners. I can see some more 90-degree connectors used in the middle there, and then 90s on the other end. And a lot of those, we can see some of the adjustable angle connectors as well. So just pretty much your standard connectors that we see used for this kind of thing. But this is meant to be a lean-to greenhouse. So there's only 3 walls, and then they just utilize the wall of this back screened-in porch area. And they use some of the MakerPipe flanges up there. I don't know if you can see those, to be able to secure these pieces of conduit to the wall. We can see up here there's one there, and then I think there's one more on the end down there. So just utilizing the MakerPipe flanges for that to secure that in place. That's always a good idea. And then we can go through these photos and kind of see the whole construction of everything coming together. And then they added the greenhouse plastic, and they're using some of these conduit cover clips. So a wide variety of these. You can find some online. We also have some available on the MakerPipe website that I'll link down below that you can use for securing plastic, and they work really well. But this thing is awesome and is working great in their garden, as we can see here. And then if we go through, eventually we can see they used some these snap-on PVC aluminum hinges that we've talked about a bunch to make a door to be able to get inside this greenhouse, and that works really well. We've talked about those on the channel before, and I'll link a video down below so you can see the video that we did on those. But those work really well. And then here we can see some pictures inside the greenhouse, and it's looking awesome. So like I said, we'll break this down in more detail on Thursday, so make sure to subscribe for that. But for now, that's a really awesome greenhouse from CL, and we love seeing it. So thanks so much for sharing it. Next up is a 10 by 10 gable greenhouse that was put together by Johnny. This was shared earlier last year, and this is really cool. And another one that's just your typical rectangular shape, as you can see here, but it has the gable roof and pretty much similar connectors, 90-degree connectors there. But this one is a lot larger, so it needs more bracing. So they're using 45-degree connectors to add that angled bracing. I don't know if you can see those. Let me highlight those here for you, where you can see in the corners they're using the 45-degree connectors just to add these angled supports. They're also using MakerPipe T connectors to add these vertical supports along the walls, and that's a good idea, just to add these supports along the wall so you don't have just long spans that are unsupported, because this is a thin-walled tube. It works really well for projects like this, but of course you want to make sure that you have proper bracing. But here you can see greenhouse plastic on the outside with some of those clips holding it in place, and we can also see they've started putting some plants inside, and I think next on the list was building some greenhouse shelves and whatnot. But really cool. A really great frame. And then we can see, I didn't highlight here, they used 135-degree connectors up there along with adjustable angle hinges to create that kind of angled gable roof. So really cool, and awesome job, Johnny. Thanks so much for sharing it. Next up is a cool greenhouse from Frank, and this one was shared around a similar time last year. And this one I like a lot. It has some really cool angles in it. So not only can you cut EMT conduit with a handheld tool, you can assemble connectors with a 5mm hex wrench, but you can also bend conduit with a handheld tool, and you don't have to do anything too crazy. Just kind of learn a new skill with a pretty inexpensive tool. But essentially here in this frame, they just have these vertical pieces that are going up, and they're on top of these footers down here, these pavers, and then the verticals are going up, and then they have a bend in them. Sorry, my line's pretty horrible there, but they have a bend in them going up, and then another bend there, and that keeps you from having to spend a ton of money on connectors. You just kind of utilize that bender, and instead of buying a connector for each corner there all the way down, you can just use a bender and save some money that way, which is a good idea. And then another good idea in a build like this is using an EMT conduit coupling that we make, which allows you to split these in half. So you don't have to do this whole, well, first of all, you get EMT conduit in a 10-foot stick, so you wouldn't be able to do this whole piece as one. So you got to separate it anyway, but it also makes it easier so you don't have to get all of the bends right. You can just kind of do them one at a time and then connect them together with couplings. But then besides that, we can see a lot of the other standard connectors like the 90s. We can see they're using 180 degree connectors up there just to add those ridge poles in between each section, kind of going in between there. And then a lot of the other standard connectors that we've talked about, like the 180 and those different things. So that's cool. We can also see they use some of the hinges from Northwoods Engineer that we sell on the website. I'll link down below. Those work really well to add doors for this kind of a project as well. But this is an awesome one from Frank, and we can go through here and we can see where he added the greenhouse plastic on the outside, and it looks fantastic and is ready for the plants inside. So really cool. Thanks so much for sharing this. Next up is kind of a mini greenhouse inside of a larger greenhouse that Eric has, and he said usually he does some kind of double frost protection on these plants here in this garden bed, and he usually just kind of rigs some kind of cover for these plants, but he used some leftover conduit and connectors that he had from a different project and essentially just added this hinging cover that sits over top of this and just adds some more kind of extra frost protection to the plants underneath, which is a good idea. Just utilizes all T connectors and then 90 degree connectors here in the front corners just to add those little stub pieces of conduit that are catching on the lip of the garden. And then he's securing these back here with 2-hole straps, and that's how he's made that kind of hinging mechanism, which is really cool. And then just like all the other builds we've seen, just greenhouse plastic over top of it with those plastic clips to hold it in place, and it's working great. And he said he can reuse this, take this off and use it for other projects, and just utilizes some leftover materials he already had, and he can do the same thing in projects in the future, which is really cool. I love hearing that, Eric. Glad it's working out for you, and thanks for sharing it. Next up is a really unique cold frame that was put together by Steven. This is a window box cold frame. As you can see here, we talked about this on the channel last year when it was originally shared, and this is really cool. Essentially just has this window set here that they can open and then reach out to these shelves and access the plants. And it's acting as a cold frame, but it gives them the ability to open it from the outside and from the inside, which is just really unique and a really creative idea. As we can see here, there's all the plants inside and the plastic on the outside, and this just utilizes a variety of connectors. We can see we've got like the T connector being used in a few different places. We've got 2 T connectors kind of side by side to create this angled piece going down. We've got some more T connectors to create the shelf support here, and going across from one side of this frame to the other, and then another T connector on the other side. So just a lot of the common connectors, and really I think it's just all T connectors to make this frame, which is really cool. And just kind of pick up a bunch of one connector and then customize it and build something out like this, and it's working out great, and just a really unique idea. And you can modify this, of course. You don't have to put this outside of a window. If you don't have one, you could modify this and add 4 legs to it and turn this into a cold frame that sits against your fence. It doesn't take up a lot of space, but has multi-tiered shelves, so you can put different plants on there. So really awesome. Thanks so much for sharing this. We love seeing it. Next up is an awesome greenhouse from Charles. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of photos of this one, but that's okay, because we can see it's pretty much just a standard garden bed that's kind of dug out a little bit on the ground, and then it has some wood panels around the outside. Pretty standard kind of garden setup that we see in a lot of bigger areas. But essentially just using some of the MakerPipe flanges here, he is attached these verticals that are extending up on the sides, and the ones on the kind of front and back I think are shorter, because we can see on the other side he's actually got those secured with 2-hole straps, it looks like, securing to the wood panels, and he has a bunch of those verticals going up. And then just like some of the builds we've seen, use a bender to achieve this bend that goes up, and then he's using the MakerPipe 135 degree connectors in the middle there, and that's how he's adding that ridge pole all the way down, and that's how he's securing the side panels to it, which is cool. And then we can see here he's using some T connectors to add these supports on the side, and so it's really just a lot of T connectors, a lot of 135 degree connectors. And like I said, we don't see any more photos, so can't see what else is going on in there, but It may just be that where he's got those pieces going up, bent, going up to the ridge pole, and then just these supports on the side with the T's, and then the flanges securing it here, and then the 2-hole straps securing it here on the side, which is a good method for securing that in place there. Can't really see, but nonetheless, it's really awesome. And just like all the others, has the greenhouse plastic with the clips holding it in place, and looks fantastic, and is just a really great idea. So thanks so much, Charles, for sharing it. Next up is another mini greenhouse, and this one comes from Daniel. We can see here that this one is over a garden bed, kind of out in the yard, a much smaller setup. But we can see here he's essentially just made these tiny little arches that attach to the outside of the bed, and then are just going all the way over and arching just like that, and then is using the Maker Pipe T connectors to just grab on to the arch, and then going back to the back, where I imagine he's got a 180 degree connector and then another T connector. That's typically how we see this kind of a frame put together. Which is really cool and nice and simple. And if you want to know how to make an arch like this, we actually have a video on making circles and arches, and we actually have a calculator to make that even easier. So I'll link that down below so you can check that out, because making arches is something that we've seen with trellises in the past, and allows you to do some pretty cool stuff. You can save money on connectors, and you can make this kind of standard hoop house shape, which is pretty common in the gardening community, and just in gardening and agriculture in general. So that's really cool. Love this one, and nice and simple, but a great use of space and a great use of materials. So thanks so much for sharing it. This one is a really unique and clever use of space. This comes from LKB, and they essentially have this beautiful kind of outdoor area in their home, and they have this summer kitchen, it's called, but they don't really use this in the colder months, and so they kind of utilize this space to be a greenhouse for some plants, as you can see through the plastic there. And so essentially, they just have these kind of outdoor concrete countertops for the summer kitchen. And essentially, they just have EMT conduit on top of that. Here we can see there's a piece. I imagine there's another piece going to the back corner. Same thing here, going down there. And then, of course, they've got these verticals that are going up from the floor on the outside of the counter, and then also these verticals going up all the way throughout the frame as well, we can see in a variety of different places. And so essentially they just built this greenhouse that they can put up really easily. Just using the 5mm hex wrench with the connectors gives you the functionality to take this apart whenever you don't need it, and then rebuild it year after year, which is really fantastic and a good use of, or a good reason why you might want to use conduit and connectors for projects like this. But they've used T connectors here. They've used 90-degree connectors. They've also got a nice peaked roof on this with, I imagine, 135-degree connectors up here, which means you're going to have these pieces going down to the side. And usually we see people use T connectors to grab onto the side for those angled supports up to the roof. So that's really cool, and just more of the standard connectors that we see used for greenhouses and used for these kind of shapes, but really cool. Got the greenhouse plastic on the outside, and then this time they're using a temporary solution, which are these binder clips, as well as some of these like plastic clamps as well down here. They got some small ones, they got some big ones. And it's just a really great solution for a temporary greenhouse they can put up whenever they're not using that summer kitchen. So really cool, LKB. Thanks so much for sharing this idea. Next up is David's greenhouse, and this is fantastic. This one looks like it's in a pretty large space, and then it's got a ton of connectors, as we can see here. This is one of these projects where it's kind of hard to break down because there's just so many connectors, but we can kind of highlight some of the main things here, which is the fact that they've got kind of that similar setup I was talking about earlier, where they have this large garden bed down here with the wood on the outside. But this one is a little bit different. Instead of having the verticals going down to flanges, this actually has long pieces of conduit sitting on top of the wood, which is a pretty good technique and method. If you can get the measurements right, then you can get that in place there, and that's a good way to do it and kind of have that stable base for the rest of the build. But they're using Maker Pipe T connectors. Right next to that, we've got 45-degree connectors in a couple different places just to add these angled supports. You've got these verticals going up to the roof. We've got T connectors on the sides, kind of adding that support halfway up. We've got more of the 180-degree connectors that we talked about earlier, which work really well for extending builds like this because, they allow you to break up the span. Then you have a piece of conduit going down, and then it just kind of breaks it up. And then it terminates inside the connector and then just keeps going down. So that works well if you're dealing with a large build and you have the constraints of what you can find the empty conduit in, which is usually 5 or 10 foot lengths. So that's a really good connector to keep in mind when you're doing this kind of thing. But here at the top, it gets really complex with a lot of different things up here. We can see they're using, looks like 135-degree connectors for the peaked roof. They've got verticals going down from the peak down to these kind of truss supports they've got going across. They've got T-connectors attaching those, and it looks just like a maze of conduit and connectors up there. Looks like they're even using some of the crossover clamps. I haven't noticed that before, but those are a good connector for this kind of thing. If you don't want to break up spans, you can cross over pieces of conduit, so that's really cool. They use those up there, but a ton of connectors, and kind of shows that you can build some really large projects and large greenhouses with conduit and connectors if you do some proper bracing and kind of add a lot of supports and just really think through the design and making sure everything is supported the way it needs to be and has the bracing that it needs to. So that's really cool. We can scroll through the rest of these photos. We can see here's another shot of the roof there, which looks really fantastic, and it's got the greenhouse panels on the top, and then it looks like greenhouse plastic on the side. But this is a really complex one with a lot of connectors and everything, but looks really fantastic, and I'm sure it's working just as great. So thanks so much for sharing this. Awesome job. Next up is Jeff's greenhouse, and this is kind of another mini one, but essentially just has this concrete garden bed down here, and on top of that he's got these maker pipe and conduit structure built to make this greenhouse. And here we can see it with the plastic. I'm actually going to go to the other picture because we can see the frame, which is really cool. And so essentially what he's done is similar to what we saw in the first one, which has these flanges at the very bottom to secure these verticals all the way down. It's got 4 of those on each side, or actually no, 3 of those on each side. One side has an extra pole because that one is framing in the gate to be able to get inside of there. But that's cool. But essentially this one's really unique because it has kind of the rectangular cube design that we see pretty commonly, which is the 90-degree connectors, just like that. And then the maker pipe 4-way connector, which is one we haven't really talked about before. That one allows you to have the pieces coming from each side. So you got 1, 2, and then another piece coming out of the front, and then also the vertical running all the way through the middle. So it joins 4 pieces of conduit together. It works really well in situations like this. But then kind of unique, he's actually got the vertical going all the way up through the 90, through the through pipe connection, bends over, and then extends up to the 135-degree connector there. And again, that works really well to allow you to save some money and not have to buy a corner connection every time you want to make this bend here. You can just use the bender and save some money. That's really cool. We've got T connectors and 180-degree connectors being used to add some supports going down, and just all in all, really great, pretty compact build, but just packed full of features. And it has that nice angled roof, has the gate attached. It looks like he's using the hinges from Northwoods Engineered, which again, I'll link down below. Those are 3D printed from Billy from the community, which is awesome. And all in all, just really great. And we'll go back here and look at this other one with the greenhouse plastic on the outside, and then more of those plastic clips. Pretty much everybody I've seen uses those. Works pretty well in this kind of situation. And, securing the greenhouse plastic on there. So that's really awesome, Jeff. Thanks so much for sharing this. And thanks to everybody for posting your greenhouses over the years and all your builds. We love seeing them. Feel free to check out the MakerPipe community if you want to see these or any other build in more detail. And I'll link all the ones from today down below. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.